Whenever people talk about what sub-series of Discworld you should start with, they usually pick the Death series, the Longer Witch series, or the Ankh-Morpork City Watch series. Why is this? Well, my personal theory is that it boils down to two reasons. Firstly, Death, Granny Weatherwax, and Samuel Vimes are the characters who most closely resemble Terry Pratchett's own personality. Whenever you think of those big speeches that Discworld fans always quote, more often than not, they're spoken by Death, Granny, or Vimes. Perhaps more importantly, though, is that each of these three series takes a satirical look at broader social themes, beyond simply the pop culture works which they parody. Death stories are an examination of, well, death, as well as other larger questions about the universe. Longer Witch books tend to skewer historical revisionism and New Age mysticism, and City Watch books are not simply cracker crime fiction, but treatises on crime and authority. Police procedurals, by their very nature, tend to be pro-authority. If the protagonists are police, after all, they are themselves representatives of authority. And while there are plenty of examples of police procedurals which turn a critical eye towards the justness of this authority, by and large police procedurals operate under the idea that cops catch crooks, and that this is an inherently good thing. While Men-at-Arms marks the point where Pratchett uses the City Watch to criticize the brutal ways in which police authority can be carried out, it's with Feet of Clay that he starts to ask deeper questions about that authority itself. Where does the police get its authority? What distinguishes it from a private army of the rich and powerful? What do people even want from their rulers and the police who enforce their rule? And, perhaps most important of all, what is Feet of Clay? The Ankh-Morpork City Watch may be in better shape than ever thanks to the boost in funding and manpower it received after the end of Men-at-Arms, but the city itself is in pretty rough shape. You've got tension between the trolls and dwarfs coming to a head, a string of mysterious murders, the city's ruler, Lord Vetinari, falling ill to a mysterious sickness, and yet another plot to reinstate the rightful king of Ankh-Morpork. Seriously, when will these nobles learn that Carrot isn't Wait, what? They want Nobby Nobbs on the throne? It's all a tangled web of mystery and intrigue, and at the center lies the key in the form of the golems, those mysterious voiceless laborers who take the jobs which no one else wants. Or at least, the jobs no one is willing to pay a fair wage for. How does the world of Feet of Clay work? There is a lot of world building established in this book, to the point where I was genuinely surprised upon revisiting it, as I'd remembered it as a simple mystery. Feet of Clay isn't an especially lengthy book, but Pratchett manages to cram a lot of sub-stories into a single seamless plot. It's honestly quite remarkable. It's certainly better craftsmanship than that statue Nebuchadnezzar was going on about, but anyways, this is the first book to establish Sam Vimes' ancestor, Suffer Not Injustice, Old Stoneface Vimes, who was leader of the city militia before he executed King Lorenzo the Kind, the last king of Ankh-Morpork. Sam isn't particularly fond of that term, though. It wasn't even execution. You execute a human being. You slaughter an animal. We don't learn too much about King Lorenzo, but we do know that he was very fond of children, and after his death a series of disturbing instruments were found in his dungeon. Before you ask though, no actually. Feet of Clay came out the same year as the first Game of Thrones book, and it predates the reveal of Jaime Lannister's kingslaying as being a good thing. If anything, Martin might have been ripping off of Pratchett. Also, before you ask, no, I have no intention of ever covering Game of Thrones on this channel. I do, however, intend to talk about racism, which plays a big role in this book. Expanding on the ideas he established in Witches Abroad, Pratchett uses Feet of Clay to explore not only how black and white gang up on green, but how all the other colors of the rainbow are arranged in a kaleidoscope of shifting alliances and prejudices. Dwarfs don't like trolls don't like dwarfs don't like werewolves don't like golems, Vimes doesn't like the undead, and while it's clear that the vampiric dragon King of Arms has certain ideas about what sort of people are suitable to rule, the specifics of this prejudice prove an important piece of information to the book's mystery. It's a refreshing piece of world building, because it establishes the existence of intersectionality, ooh, very woke term, on the disc, which is an important aspect of real-world civil rights and a topic that I wish more people would consider when writing metaphorical stories on race. This acknowledgement of different kinds of prejudices and structures of power targeted at different kinds of people plays an important role in the Golem subplot in Feet of Clay. Golems are artificial creations who operate under the rules of their chem, the spell that gives them life. The chem mostly follow the same rules as Isaac Asimov's 3 laws of robotics, with additional instructions that are relevant to whatever labor the golem works. However, the key difference between Pratchett's golems and Asimov's robots lies in their personhood. With the exception of Robbie and Bicentennial Man, Asimov was insistent that his robots were not fully sentient beings, but merely very complex tools, even if the in-text evidence pointed to the contrary. However, a major subplot of Feet of Clay is the realization by the City Watch that the golems are in fact people, and their forced labor is an inherently unjust situation. The chem doesn't give them purpose, but rather binds them, and it's only when a golem is rebaked with a mouth and allowed to speak that the lot of golems starts to improve. The last piece of world building in Feet of Clay is all the new recruits to the City Watch. This is the first book to have Constable Visit, a devout Omnian who cements the characterization of the Omnian faith for the rest of the series. And Wee Mad Arthur makes his first appearance here as well, though since this is before Pratchett had created the Knack-Knack Feegle, he is simply referred to as a very angry gnome. The first of many unhelpfully disorganizing imps given to Vimes by his missus makes its premiere in this book, and while he'd been a major character since Guards, if you had any doubts about Ironfounderson's intelligence, they'll probably be put to rest by the end of this story. The Carrot is still the nice dwarvish boy that we all know and love, and as with his royal lineage, Pratchett is far too subtle to ever flat out say how cunning he is. But in Feet of Clay, we see that even if Carrot would never think to outright exploit people, he's not necessarily above a little subterfuge. The last new recruit, though, is perhaps the most interesting piece of world building established in this book, the dwarfish forensic expert Cheery Littlebottom. See, Cheery seems like any ordinary dwarf. Short stature, Welsh accent, and of course the beard. You can't be a dwarf without a beard. I mean, Tolkien himself said so. No man or elf has ever seen a beardless dwarf, unless he were shaven in mockery, and would then be more like to die of shame. For the Nogrim have beards from the beginning of their lives, male and female alike. But you see, Cheery is hiding a very dark secret, which is that he is actually a she. It's true that dwarves don't see gender, but if a lady dwarf ever wants to come out as a lady, well, she can expect to be shunned, unemployed, and regarded as some kind of pervert. It's don't ask, don't tell, with dwarves and gender, and while many think that this is a perfectly just and tolerant system, to dwarves like Cheery, who don't simply want closeted tolerance but open acceptance, the system is stifling. And one of the reasons Cheery came to Ankh-Morpork at all is that, in such a big city, surely there are clubs and such, where she can be her real self, when she's on her off hours. What's funny about this situation is that, even if it's a stand-up of Tolkien's world-building, it actually ends up demonstrating a world-building phenomenon Tolkien himself would gripe about often. Despite the obvious parallels with Cheery and LGBT experiences, Pratchett himself denied the intentionality of these parallels. And in an interview with the site Faster Than Life, when discussing the possible transgender allegory of Cheery, Pratchett had this to say. Let's start with the fact that I would not be a good author if I sat down and said, right, I'm going to explore the issue of, fill an issue of the moment. The stuff evolves from the characters. It has to. So, before you ask, no. Pratchett did not intend from the beginning for Cheery's story to be an LGBT allegory. His intention at the start was simply to explore that quote about female dwarves to its logical conclusion, and see what fun he could stir up in the process. However, as with Tolkien's own cordial dislike of allegory in all its manifestations, Pratchett was more than happy for any LGBT fans who felt seen by Cheery's presence. So, if you'd like to apply Cheery to your own real-world understanding of your identity, I don't think Sir Terry would have minded. Now, for those of you wondering, what does Feet of Clay have to say? Allow me to briefly quote the passage that inspired its title. Just as you saw that the feet and toes were partly of baked clay and partly of iron, so this will be a divided kingdom. Yet it will have some of the strength of iron in it, even as you saw iron mixed with clay. As the toes were partly iron and partly clay, So this kingdom will be partly strong and partly brittle. And just as you saw the iron mixed with baked clay, so the people will be a mixture, and will not remain united any more than iron mixes with clay. Daniel 2:41-43. The Book of Daniel is, of course, where we get the phrase feet of clay, used to signify shaky foundations. However, it's also a tale about authority, where it comes from and where it gets its legitimacy. Its basic message is that when kingdoms grow too powerful and arrogant, they turn into beasts, and it is only when acknowledging that their authority comes from God that peace and prosperity is restored. The basic message of Feet of Clay is somewhat similar to this, but there are some key differences. Without getting into spoilers, the main conflicts of the story are all caused by certain groups desiring a ruler who will serve them and their interests. However, none of the rulers that these people want are willing to do what they want them to do. Real leaders are not like God, infallible and omnipotent. They have their own foibles and flaws, even if they aren't outright despots or oppressors. The sheer number of contradictory needs a ruler must fulfill make perfection impossible. And while Daniel tells the faithful to endure oppression until God sorts things out, on the disc, that sort of attitude won't really get you anywhere. The only way beasts can be humbled is if people take them to task, through the authority of the law. The law is often broken and imprecise, but it's also how the voiceless are able to speak, and how the police can, ideally, enforce justice. "You are in favor of the common people?" said Dragon mildly. "The common people," said Vimes, "they're nothing special. They're no different from the rich and powerful, except they've got no money or power. But the law should be there to balance things up a bit, so I suppose I've got to be on their side." Like his ancestor, Sam Vimes refuses to turn the City Watch into a private militia for the city's elite. Instead, he turns it into an instrument of the law. And so long as the Watch continues to draw its power from the law, it shall avoid becoming a beast. Final verdict. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever heard was from Neil Gaiman, where he said that if you wanted to write for a certain genre, you shouldn't only read books from that genre. You should read as many books from your chosen genre as you can, but you should also read as many books as you can from other genres, because seeing compelling stories in other genres allows you to come up with new and exciting stories for your chosen genre. I think the City Watch books are an excellent example of this principle in action, because despite being fantasy books, they draw so much from police procedurals that there's really nothing quite like them. Even most police procedurals don't explore their genre to the depth that Pratchett does with The Watch, and it's all enough for me to give Feet of Clay a 10 out of 10. Believe me when I say that the best is yet to come, both with the City Watch books and Discworld as a whole. For now though, I'm Marc signing off, and I hope you liked this video. If you did, and you'd like to see me make more, please leave a like or comment down below, share my video via Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or other means, and subscribe to my channel. Also, if you would like to help this channel out, I have a Patreon, which you can contribute to via the link in the description. If you sign up, you'll get sweet bonuses like an internet hug, early access to videos, and the ability to vote in polls to help me decide which works to cover next. Also, if I manage to get to 250 subscribers by the end of this year, that's 250 YouTube subscribers, by January 1st, 2022, I will play and stream Dragon Quest V for you all. Let's make this happen, people. I really, really want to do this. Thank you all, and I will see you in the next one.